Hi guys, and welcome to yet another review, and this time I'm bringing you the Thieaudio Cypher. Again, a headphone, again something which I usually don't do, but well, if I've done the one on the Q ears, then I have to do the one here on the Cypher. It's only fair. Anyway, this is the latest from Thieaudio with regards to their headphones. They've had the Ghost, they've had the Wraith, and now the Cypher. The Ghost, I've actually got a chair. It's $129. The Wraith I never got to get. I never received it. So I never tested it. And now I've got the Cypher, which is $399. So a significant price difference between the two of them, obviously justified by a number of factors, which I'll get into it in a second. I've got here, not for so much the comparison, but just to kind of see what the Cypher is about. I brought out here the Altruva from Q years. I've got the HE400 as well, and I've got here two IEMs from let's say a brand which is a AliExpress brand, which is Hanadomi, and they've got two headphones, the B1 and the C1. This is the C1, and sorry, this is the B1, my apologies. This is the B1, okay, and this one is the C1. Okay, so it doesn't really, I mean, they are both identical, so I'm just going to keep one here. I'm just going to keep the C1 here, or the B1, doesn't really matter. The difference is that the B1 has got a slightly different shell or casing. Otherwise, they are exactly the same IEM. They go for about $129. And they are the only one here which is closed back. The rest, the Ghost, the Cypher, the Altruva, and the Hi-Fi Man are all open back. In that, Hi-Fi Man is also a planar. Anyway, what is the Cypher? Well, the Cypher, as I was saying, is the company's new flagship headphone. It uses a number of well, there are a number of details that justify its price. First of all, the build quality of the Cypher is very premium. Full metal, carbon metal bracket, nice forks leather kind of padding here, or strapping, all metal shell, nice pads, nice cable. It just screams premium. The whole open back design grill here looks very premium, looks very upscale. This is not a product that you hold it and you think, ah, okay, this is cheap. No, this is the total contrast to, for example, something like the Altruva, which, I mean, okay, it is nice for the price, for the $80 that it costs, but you can definitely see that this is a premium built product, and the whole thing externally screams that. Also, they use a newly designed 50mm dynamic driver with two things which are unusual, at least, or not so common. But when you are talking about high quality drivers, yes, they do become common, which is they use a semi-crystalline polymer and a rubber composite diaphragmed driver. So the actual diaphragm is separate from the actual cone of the driver. And they use a 20-core N45 magnet assembly on that driver, which is very uncommon. You don't usually see so many cores or so many magnets being used to basically power and the driver, or to create the magnetic field for the driver. So those two, plus the meticulous attention to using premium materials, and the overall look and the overall assembly, I think all of that are reasons to already justify the price. Of course, $399 is not pocket money, and yes, there is also the question of the sound. Does the sound correspond to a $399 or $400 priced headphone? Well, that's again something that is always going to be a little bit subjective. But if you go from, or if you start from the premise that this is not by any means or a headphone that has been designed to be boomy or bassy or anything of the sort, then you straight away you start to understand what has been the design premise behind the Cypher. The design premise behind the Cypher is to be an overall very balanced sound signature where quality of the sound is the most important. It's not quantity of the sound. So it's not quantity of bass, quantity of mids, or quantity of highs. Although, yes, having said that, that 2 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz area is a little bit forward, and sometimes, especially the volume knob turns up a little bit more. If you choose a song which that part of the spectrum has been a little bit overemphasized, it can be a little bit in your face. And there were 1 or 2 songs that I did encounter that. I mean, for example, one of the songs that I did find that issue was from certain songs that I was listening, like for example, "Sweat" by JK Reviv remix, "Analog" by Soul Persona, were 2 songs where I encountered that a little bit too much. But on the other hand, "Up and Up" from Jeff Ryan, I actually was surprised. I was expecting it to be a little bit aggressive there, but no, it wasn't aggressive. And aggressive maybe is not the right word. It's just, it stands out with the whole neutrality of the headphone being so well executed. That part of the spectrum, and I'm actually curious. I haven't been able to see any diagrams or graphs on the Cypher, and I'm curious to see a graph to see if what I'm saying actually corresponds to what is then measured. The neutrality across the board of the frequency range of the Cypher is so interesting, or so well done, that this part of the spectrum just jumps out. And I don't think it jumps out by a tremendous amount, but it jumps out enough to be noticeable, especially because it scales equally with the rest of the volume and with the rest of the frequency range. So, there are songs that you want to push the volume a little bit more to get a little bit more bass, or a little bit more engagement in the bass, but because that part of the spectrum also scales equally, it can, depending on the song, maybe reach levels which start becoming a little bit too intense, and you end up having to lower it. Okay, now obviously by using different pads, and I did try a few different pads. I've actually got a nice selection of pads, but I ended up with the stock ones. These velour pads, I think, do the job perfectly, and they match perfectly the headphones whole intention in terms of the sound. So, trying to break down now the sound a little bit more, and now that the physical aspect of it, we know it's well done, we know it's properly done. It's a hefty, meticulous construction that looks the part, looks the business. There's nothing there that can be in any way, I think at least, this doesn't look the part. No, the fact they've used premium materials like carbon fiber and so on, it all just the whole thing just screams premium. Now the sound is where I think we want to kind of delve a little bit more, or at least I think most of you will be more interested in terms of the sound. Now, let me set the premise here. I don't have a huge amount of headphones, like I said, and I usually listen a lot more to IEMs. But when I do these reviews and I listen to a headphone, I do take into account that I'm listening to a headphone with the necessary, let's say, adaptations that need to be made, and I then try to find an analog in an IEM where that sound is and what it kind of sits in. And as I was saying, the Cypher is, I would say, it sounds like a BA, full BA IEM. It's got a sound which can come across as something like, for example, a Studio 4, or can come across as like an RSV, in that it's all about being for clean in the highs, clean in the mids, very realistic. So the mids and the highs are definitely the star of the show. They have there's a full-bodied mid-range presentation there, without a doubt, and then with everything being done in a very accurate manner. Let's keep that as the main thing. And then in terms of the bass, it's enough for, I would say, 90% of the times, or 90% of the times of the style of music that I like listening to. Okay, there were occasions where I was listening to songs which were a little bit more, let's say, bass dominant, that I did find the Cypher was just a little bit on the thin side. But overall, I think that's the best kind of comparison that I can give the Cypher. It's got a sound which is very reminiscent of a full BA, IEM, where you don't feel that there's any sort of kind of another IEM that reminded me very much, or that this reminds me very much of, is the Aful Cantor. And I think, again, maybe perhaps the Cantor might even be a better comparison for the Cypher. The Cantor and the sound of the Cantor is exactly basically what the Cypher is. The only thing here that I think the Cantor might edge out the Cypher ever so slightly is that the Cantor doesn't have that little forwardness that I mentioned in the 2 to 3 kilohertz area. And because it doesn't have that forwardness, you're able to scale it and push the volume a little bit more. But that balance that you find in the Cantor with the tendency of it being more mid and high frequency focused is what we have here in the Cypher. We have bass in the right amount, in the right quantity, but it can, with certain genres or with certain types of music, be a little bit on the lean side. You know, it's not that it doesn't have punch, but it's a very polite punch. Let's put it that way. If there was a little bit more there, I don't think it would overall spoil the whole presentation of the headphone, and I think the balance would still be maintained because you know, it is a very high quality driver, and ultimately the bass is refined, it is uncolored, and it is, you know, the perfect example of what a uncolored audiophile style bass should be like. That's the reality. Now, mid-range, as I said, is where you know, there's that sense of forwardness, like I mentioned before, but that's where it shines. It's the strong. I think it's the strongest point of this headphone. The amount of micro details, you know, the amount of layering or capability that it has, it's pretty incredible. And you know, again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. Besides that occasional little excess in the 2 kilohertz area, which ultimately you can very easily do, and I did to experiment. You drop that 2 to 4 kilohertz area there by 2-3 dBs, you know, just a simple EQing, and it is absolutely mind-boggling how the Cypher just becomes a totally different beast. You're now able to push the volume, and everything just falls in its place beautifully. And I think that's one thing I would definitely recommend. You know, drop that 2-3 dBs in that 2 to 4 kilohertz area, and you will be thoroughly impressed. Trust me, you will be. Highs, you know, again, that's where the quality of the driver is shining. They're very high quality. It's got loads of high frequency presence, and very delicate in the way that it's done. The highs are by no means, or you know, harsh or aggressive or unpolished. Very elegant, and again, a true testament of a high quality driver. You know, you have this ability to shimmer and to produce the symbols. It just comes across beautifully. I mean, really nothing that can be said there. As for the let's say the technical aspects, you know, staging and soundstage, imaging, and so on and so forth, I'm not going to say that it's not good. It's good, it's decent, but I was expecting, to be honest, especially because it's an open back, I was expecting a slightly bigger stage. To that extent, I would say that the stage on the Altruva was basically the same as the Cypher, and that was a surprise, to be honest. I wasn't expecting that. Imaging, yes, is very good. You know, it's capable of pinpointing things very well, good left and right, and so on and so forth. Detail retrieval, spectacular. I mean, that's where it's shining. You can pick up all the twinkles and sparkles and everything that you want. And tone and timbre and tonality, again, I would say for the most part as well, very accurate. Apart from the occasional here and there where I would have liked a little bit more of that warmth in the bass, a little bit more of that bass presence to maybe make certain things sound just a little bit more realistic. I honestly cannot fault it. I honestly cannot say, oh no, I was disappointed. No, I'm not. It is, look, it is a very, very solidly sounding headphone. That's the reality. You know, that's what I have to say. If I was saying anything other than that, I would be lying. So no, as an overall, as a conclusion, what can I say about the Cypher? An extremely well built headphone, phenomenal build quality. Everything in that aspect has ticked the right boxes. It really is on a very high standard. With regards to its sound, it's as balanced as it can possibly be, and keeps that balance, apart from the occasional little bit here and there at 2 kilohertz, because of the way that it scales. And I think it's just down to the way that it scales. That can be obviously, as I mentioned, resolved by lowering it by 2-3 dBs in that area. And then if you do that, and that's how I ended up listening to the Cypher for the majority of the time, then what you have is a very high level sound, detailed, balanced, non-fatiguing. It's even got vibes of something like the Thieaudio Hexa. If for those that like the Thieaudio Hexa and that like that neutrality, that no frequencies overdone, no frequencies over. This is that sort of vibe of sound. That the Cantor. If you like the Cantor, this is that sort of vibe. It is a it's a headphone that delivers where it matters. If what you're looking for is clean audiophile neutral type of presentation with loads of micro details, all the twinkles and sparkles that you can possibly want, without anything really coming out in a unduly manner. And again, I repeat, and I'm sorry to be nailing the head on that one, that 2 kilohertz area is something that, on me personally, I was sometimes just, I know it's like I said, I don't want, that's not me telling you to pay, but pay attention to that area. That's basically it. Just be attentive to that part of this frequency spectrum, because it is the only thing that in this overall very neutral, very correct sounding presentation comes out a little bit not as polished, let's put it that way. All right. Anyway, guys, that's basically it for the Cypher. As for the Altruva, yes, it's got its place, but by no means or form or anything is it a match for the Cypher. No, the Cypher completely overpowers the Altruva. Yes, I would say that the Altruva maybe in the bass department can have a little bit more engagement that is lacking in the Cypher, but it hasn't got the same quality of the bass. So that's it. As for the Ghost, it's tuned in a completely different manner. It's a product of $129. It hasn't got the same build quality, nothing even remotely close. It is a 40mm dynamic driver. A really solid, unfatiguing listen, mind you. Great bass, a little bit boosted. And yes, if you go back and forth, you think, oh, this is sounding more competent, but it's not of the same quality. Okay, it just doesn't have the same quality as the Cypher. HE400, I would say, in terms of the mids and the highs, it does impress, and that's again down to the fact that it's a planar. Bass wise, it's basically the same thing as the Cypher. It is a more leanish type of bass, but it needs loads of power to actually start shining and to really come alive. And while the Cypher is relatively easy to drive, it doesn't really require much to get it going. As for the Hanadomi, look, considering the price, and if I was to make a more fair comparison between the Hanadomi, for example, and the Ghost, this is an incredible headphone. It is. I don't even know if it's not any longer, if it's still available anymore or not. What I do know is that it's very well built, metal, wood, really nice build quality. It looks the part, the business. It really is a nice headphone. The complete opposite to the Cypher. By comparison, the Hanadomi, the C1 sounds colored, but yes, it will impress. It will impress with its sound, and it can be. I would say it's it's here because it's the complete polar opposite. Think of it this way: the C1 is something along the lines of the Punch Audio Martillo, okay? That's the punch. That's the Hanadomi. While this is like I said, a Cantor or Truth Hears Hexa, or maybe even a Blessing 2, something along those lines. That's the difference here. They both are really good headphones. They both are solid, really nice, but there's no comparison. It's just to position one versus the other so you can get a better feel of what this is about. This is about being audiophile correct and playing music to a high level and to a high standard of detail and so on. So definitely a headphone that will please those that are all detail orientated and like the latest in terms of detail. One last thing here about the Cypher. It brings this kind of case, I don't know what to call it, because the headphone does allow for this high level of versatility in terms of the cups to be turned around and so on and so forth. It sits nicely inside there, so really nice case. I prefer this to the more traditional case that you see on headphones. It makes it a little bit more easy to store and everything. And that's it, guys. I think I've said enough. Solid, interesting headphone. If you have the ability to listen to it, of course listen to it. Again, take my opinion about the Cypher and about headphones, as someone that is starting to get into the headphone game more and more now lately, and I want to get more into it. I'm starting to get tired of having earphones rammed inside my ear, and this was definitely a very interesting surprise. It's definitely going to be a headphone that I'm going to be using as a reference when I want something which is neutral-ish, high detailed. Definitely the Cypher will be the one that I will go to for comparisons. Guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions, please feel free to ask me. Take care now. Bye bye.